Did you know that the fear of success is actually a bigger problem for almost everybody than the fear of failure and the fear of rejection or all the other things we're focused on? And until you get over the fear of success, you'll always have a ceiling that will sabotage your efforts. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to identify and overcome your fear of success. So we're going to talk about what I think is the biggest fear that we all need to conquer, if you will, or manage or clear. It's the fear of success. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because most of us are focused on the fear of failure. We think that success is going to make us happy. And like it's the answer to a lot of the challenges that we have in our lives, but it's the actual problem for most of us. It's much bigger than the fear of failure. So I want to break down, how do you know if you have the fear of success? What is the fear of success? One of the reasons that we don't get a handle on is because we don't understand it. So what is it? How does it operate? What are the elements of it? What's the recipe? And what are the solutions? So once you identify what the fear of success is, how it's operating in your life, then what can you do to change it? And then I also want to talk about a subject that's related to this, but it's different enough to have its own conversation, which is the fear of succeeding. And this is going to blow a lot of people's minds. It blew my mind when I, first realized that there's this other animal. So we already don't understand the fear of success, but then what about the fear of success? Meaning, what if we're afraid of succeeding again? Like we've already succeeded at something, but now we're afraid of succeeding again. And that's its whole other animal. So we're going to break all of those things down in this video. So let's talk about what I think is the most important fear to talk about. We spend a lot of time talking about certain fears, fear of rejection, fear of failure, like the surface level fears. And then we get into some of the deeper fears that are underneath those surface level fears. But a fear that I think very few people talk about because we don't understand it. It just doesn't make any sense the way our mind works, but is actually the main reason that most people don't succeed is, ironically, the fear of success. And what has become so clear to me over these years in my journey in personal development, as well as my own experience inside of my own journey toward success, and what that means is when most of us are searching for ways to succeed, we are not identifying the real target, meaning that what we're actually searching for are ways to not fail because we have a fear of failure. So we think if we have a fear of failure, then the way to get over that fear is to learn the skills or follow the rules that are going to help us avoid the failure, because that's where our fear lies. So if we learn how to avoid failure, which is number one, not possible, number two, not helpful. But if our whole goal is to avoid failure, but our actual fear lies in success, then even if we learn how to avoid failure, we don't address the actual fear. And if any fear, in this case, the fear of success as it relates to goals and achievement, if that fear is not adequately identified and addressed, then no solution is going to help, right? Because we're not actually identifying the root fear. And so my belief is that most people are more afraid of success than they are failure. And we already have a problem trying to get over our fear of failure, but that's not even the real mountain to climb. So even if we get over that, even if we find a way, and most people are trying to address the fear of failure in the wrong way, in my opinion. But even if we win that game, it's the wrong game, because the fear of success is going to overpower all of the fears of failure or all of the solutions that we find to get over the fear of failure, right? So if the fear of success is more powerful than the fear of failure anyway, and we learn how to conquer the fear of failure, that doesn't clear the fear of success. I just got a visual of two mountains that we're climbing, right? The fear of success is much higher. The fear of failure is not, but we struggle in climbing the fear of failure, and we never actually summit to the fear of success peak. And that can be so frustrating and confusing. Like, let's say we conquer the fear of failure, then why does the human still sabotage? Doesn't make any sense, because we feel like we've overcome all of our issues, right? So that's what we want to dive into here, is what is the fear of success? And another reason why a lot of us don't overcome it is because we don't understand it. Like, it doesn't make sense, because most of our lives were programmed with the idea that success is the Band-Aid. Success is the solution. Success is the answer. Success is what's going to make us feel better about ourselves. Success is what's going to make life feel more meaningful. Success is going to give us all the things that we're wanting, all the freedom and all the stuff that we are chasing in our life. And so if success is the answer, the way that we're programmed, to our problems, how can success be the problem? That doesn't make any sense. So in order to understand this, we literally have to remove ourselves from the current perspective that most of us are operating under, and recognize that fear of failure is a problem, but fear of success is a bigger one. And here's the cool thing. If we address the fear of success, a lot of our fears of failure are actually just constructed in our brains, and they don't really need to be overcome. Because a lot of them are just like false fears, or fears that we can't clear anyway. There's so much there. What do you want to add before I go off on another tangent?
Right. I remember the first time this concept was brought up to me, and I had that confusion, right? Like that it didn't make sense to me that this would be something that I was afraid of, when it was something that I was working so hard to achieve. And one of the things that I think could help, if you're watching this video and you're like, does this apply to me? Is this a fear that I have? Is that if you know what you're supposed to be doing to achieve your goals, right? If you know what to do and you're not doing it, there's likely a fear of success underneath there. And when you understand that concept, at least I'll speak for myself, when I understood that concept, like, oh, I didn't necessarily have to understand how the fear worked yet, but just to recognize, like, okay, there's like this kind of undercover, unconscious fear that's actually driving my non-actions, right? Then that really made, it gave me an opportunity to breathe a little bit, because I could stop trying to overcome, right, all of the stuff that you were talking about, Sean, on the lower, smaller mountain to get over my fear of failure. And I could just recognize, okay, there's this bigger force at play here. So let me actually address that, and then know that in climbing that, I'll, like you said, right, I'll also have summited the smaller hill.
That's a really big piece of being able to identify. Right? We live in this world where we want to be able to diagnose ourselves. Like, how do I know if I'm sick? How do I know if I have just the cold, or if I have COVID, or if I have, whatever? How do I know if I have a fear of this or a fear of that? So here's the way to know if you have a fear of success. Look in the mirror and see if you're human. Maybe some people can't tell just by looking in the mirror, but if you're relatively sure that you are human, then I'm positive you have a fear of success. And it really truly is that simple. And you know me, I very, very rarely talk in universals, because I believe universals are always wrong. In this case, I believe that every human, certainly every human that's going to be watching this channel and watching this video, has a fear of success. But specifically, what are some of the things that we want to look at? And one of them is, if you are teed up to succeed. So let's say you're in a business where you've got to make outreaches for people to hire you as a coach or as a speaker or something like that. And you have the leads, or you've identified people to send direct messages to, and you know exactly what you're going to say. Everything is lined up for you, And you believe that if you do all those things, you'll probably succeed, and you don't do those things. What else could it be? I mean, yeah, it could be the fear of rejection and the fear of some of this other stuff, but it's if everything is lined up for you and you're still not doing the actions, then there's got to be a bigger reason there, especially when so many of us have already focused and studied and done coaching and gone to seminars and read books on the fear of rejection. We understand that every no gets us closer to a yes, or we understand that other people's perceptions of the world are different than ours and they're making the right decision for them. And we've got all these magical memes that are amazing, and we share them, and they look fantastic and they feel good when we read them, and we intellectually understand all that stuff, and yet we still don't make the calls, or we still don't outreach. Yeah, there could be some fear of the rejection or fear of failure still in there, but there's probably a bigger dose of the fear of success. So when we know what to do and we're not doing it, and we've addressed the fear of failure, but we're still not doing it, then I got to believe, and where I go to with my clients, and I'm sure you do too, is what's the real reason? Like, what's the bigger reason beyond what is presenting itself as rejection or failure? What's the bigger reason that this human might actually be afraid? And to really hammer this home and make sure everybody understands how big of a problem this is. If we have two conversations, one is failure and one is success, and we're afraid of both of them, what do?
Nothing.
Like, we're afraid of failing and we're afraid of succeeding.
Yeah.
But especially if, because of the way we're programmed, we've only focused on one of them, and the one that we tend to focus on is the one that's less meaningful, the one that's less powerful. Is there any wonder why so many of us are sabotaging ourselves? And this is the question that used to fascinate me to no end, because the human brain is so incredibly powerful. And we all have a mode that we can get into called unstoppable. It doesn't matter what's in our way. There's a big enough reason to do the thing than there is to not do the thing. And for some of us, that could be graduating from college. For some of us, it could be saving somebody that we love from danger. For some of us, it could be achieving something or producing something. We all have something that we've gotten into unstoppable mode to accomplish. So the brain has the ability to become undistractable. The brain has the ability to turn off the notifications of the phone if it's important enough. The brain has the ability to not check emails. The brain has the ability to not care what anybody else says. The brain has the ability to overpower all of our sabotaging habits and all the scary things that we have if the reason is big enough. So if the brain has the ability to turn off all of those obstacles, and yet most of us have not done it, why? Especially when we're so saturated with overcoming the fears that are presenting themselves on the surface, meaning primarily the fear of rejection and the fear of failure. We're so oversaturated. And most people believe that they know how to overcome that, but they still don't. Like, how many times have you been in a conversation with somebody about failure, let's say, and you've said, now, when it comes to failure, what you're really afraid of is this, or, other people's opinions of you don't matter because they don't really have anything to do with you, or rejection of any kind. And how many times do you get people that go, yeah, I know that, but I just can't get it, right? I get it, but I don't got it. I mean, they don't usually say that, but I know that. And a lot of people actually train that. And you and I do that too. And this still grabs us. Like, it's not like we're beyond any of the things that we're talking about. But so often I hear people that intellectually understand, but still haven't moved through. And I'm sure you see that all the time, right?
Absolutely. What occurred to me as you were talking is that I think that the fear of rejection and the fear of failure are actually manufactured by our fear of success as a way to protect us from that thing that we ultimately fear.
All right, so that's a little too deep. We don't want to go too deep about the real stuff on this channel.
Heard.
Yes,
Which
I
is why it's
absolutely
not
agree.
going to work. Yeah, I mean, and I say that because that's why it's not going to work. That's why it's not enough, because they're not designed, like they're not the problem. And I think it's really important to understand that, so that we can stop messing around with the stuff I guess we have a choice, right? We can mess around with the stuff at the surface, and we can do that and continuously be in the same place, having the same conversations where our head gets it and our body doesn't, right? Which is where you were just speaking a moment ago. And I think that's even more frustrating when we do know something and yet we don't have the physical capacity to overcome it. Or we can say, okay, wait a minute, what is this thing that's underneath it? And then uproot the whole tree.
To be really clear, just kind of give my version of what Michelle said. The reason that most of us don't get over our sabotaging behaviors or don't succeed ultimately where we want to go and what we want to achieve is because we think the sabotaging behaviors are the problems, but they're not the problems. The sabotaging behaviors, fear of failure being one of them, fear of rejection, procrastination, perfectionism, all those things that present themselves as sabotaging problems are actually not problems. They're solutions. They're solutions to a deeper problem. And the fear of success is the deeper problem for most of us. So just to be clear on that, which absolutely obviously relates to this whole video, because in this video, we're going to tell you what, for most of you, is the actual problem so that you can stop aiming at all these other targets that aren't the problem. And the idea of solving solutions just doesn't make any sense to us. So if we think perfectionism is the problem, but perfectionism is actually a solution, then we're trying to solve a solution, which doesn't make any sense. Again, to your point, why we don't actually go anywhere. So hopefully that lands for you all. Let us know if it does land. Put a comment down here. And my experience with this kind of a conversation is when it clicks, it's mind-blowing for a lot of us, because it's like we're shining the light somewhere else that we've never shined it before. But it simplifies things. And that's what we want this to do. We want this to simplify things for you. Because if you agree with what we're saying so far, that the fear of success is actually a bigger problem than all the other fears, then what would you rather spend your time and energy and money on? Solving the biggest problem or solving a bunch of the smaller problems that can only take you so high up the mountain? So hopefully that is landing and actually intriguing to you, that the simplification process of identifying the actual problems is hopefully encouraging, because now, you just mentioned the roots. Now we can actually go after the roots of the whole tree, and all these other sabotaging problems, the perfectionism and procrastination, all this other stuff. Those are just hanging off the limbs of the tree, off the branches of the tree. Those are not actually the roots. So let's dive into the root of the fear of success. And to give you a working definition of the fear of success, because again, it doesn't make sense the way our brains are programmed around success. The fear of success is when the cost of success is higher than the desire for success. The cost of success is higher than the desire to succeed. So we all have a desire to succeed. But in order to succeed, we have to do certain things. And a lot of those things feel like sacrifices to us. We're going to lose stuff on the way to our success, or we're going to pay certain prices, and those prices are just too high. The cost of success, the sacrifice of success is higher than our desire to succeed. And ultimately what that is a values conflict. And there are 4 main values conflicts that we've seen over the years of diving into this conversation about success. There are 4 main reasons that humans are afraid to succeed. They're all values conflicts, because in order to succeed, you have to confront one of these 4 things. For most of us, we got all of them to a certain degree. There might be one of them that's operating more or more powerful, but most of us have a little bit of all 4 of these. The 4 values conflicts are time, visibility, money, and responsibility. And these aren't ordered in any way, because again, for some people, time is the biggest one, and for some people, money is the biggest one. So what that means, and we're going to dive into this and we're going to give you the solutions to all this, but what that means for each one of them is, if you succeed at the level that you want to, you're going to sacrifice or confront something in these values conversations. So for instance, if I succeed, I'm going to have a lot less time to do the things that I want to do, to spend time with my family. Or if I succeed, I'm going to be more visible. There's going to be a bigger spotlight, a hotter spotlight on me, because all the people that I see that are succeeding, they're in the spotlight. Or if I succeed, I'm going to bump up against money problems. Now, where this gets even more convoluted inside of money, because money is a symbol of success. So now we're talking like 2 layers of doesn't make sense, right? Because part of succeeding is money, the way we're programmed. So how can success be the fear and money be a part of the fear? Neither one of those makes sense. But our relationship to money is so convoluted and so varying across the board that it's really slippery and really sticky to get into our relationship to money. So for instance, for a lot of people, more money equals more problems. The more money you have, the more money other people might ask to borrow. Or the more money you have, the more challenges you might have in where to spend it. Or you might have associated money to being a jerk. You know, maybe you had a rich uncle that the whole family hates, because once he got rich, you know, he turned into a Scrooge or something like that. And so your little brain might have gone, okay, money is associated to being a jerk. Well, I never want to be a jerk. So that means I can't have money. So a lot of us have an association between a lot of money and being a bad person or an unhealthy person, or money gets in the way of a lot of relationships. So a lot of people learn that money, or the lack of money, or the lack of conversation around money, or having too much money, or having not enough money is what caused my parents to have a divorce. Okay, well, I don't want a divorce, so I got to avoid this money thing, because that's the thing that, so the point is, there are many different layers to our money relationship. And if that is associated to success, which for most of us it is, that's going to be a problem. And we don't want to confront. If we don't want to confront the money problems, then it's easier to just not succeed. The 4th one is responsibility. The more success I have, the more responsible I will be for other people. And that could be like in a business setting. It means that you've got to pay people's salaries, and you've got to uphold the company, or it might mean you need to make more responsible choices inside of your family, whatever it is. So those are the 4 main buckets that I've seen over the years that most people fall into in terms of their values conflicts underneath the fear of success. What do you want to add to that?
It's really helpful to have you break that down that way, because when I didn't understand what the fear of success was, and I was unclear on how it was operating in my life, when I started to learn what you just articulated, I could see how I played out those stories, right? So I could see like, oh, dang, I do believe that. And it started to make some more sense to me. So I really appreciated what you just dissected.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because for us to make any significant change in our individual lives, we have to identify what the individual problems are.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that we talk in theory about why certain people are afraid of succeeding or why most people are afraid of succeeding. What matters is, why are you afraid of succeeding? And I don't want any of you to ask yourself, am I afraid of succeeding? Don't ask yourself a yes or no question. I want you to ask yourself, how am I afraid of succeeding? Because I'm telling you, you are.
Yeah.
Based on all my experience, you are. Now the question is how?
Right.
Because the brain will search for answers to a how question different than an if question. If you're asking yourself, am I afraid of succeeding or not? You're operating with the piece of your brain that's actually part of the problem. You're operating with a piece of your intellectual ego that's trying to pretend you're not.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to try to answer that question in that room of the house. We got to go into the room of the house where we embrace the idea that if you're human, which is why I gave you that standard earlier, if you're human, if you have a brain that is programmed the way all human brains are programmed and wired the way human brains are wired, you're afraid of succeeding. You might not have a deep fear of success compared to other people, but you are.
Yeah.
So now the real important question is how and where.
Yeah.
And or why, and how do I get over it, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to consume that breakdown of those 4 values conflicts through the lens of how it relates to you.
Yeah.
Do you actually have a fear of not having the time that you want to have? Do you have a fear of actually having too much money for your level of comfort? And what matters is, or at least what's important to understand, is that all the things that we're talking about is relevant to your belief system.
Yeah.
And that's an individual thing. That's why we always say you've got to have individualized attention. Because even if 100 people have the same value conflict of money, the same solution is not going to apply to everybody. In fact, there might be 100 different solutions, even inside of the exact same values conflict of money.
Yeah.
Because what we need to address, and therefore what we need to solve, is our individual associations to all the things we're talking about. So my association to responsibility is different than your association to responsibility. Therefore, my solution is probably going to be different than your solution.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, I would encourage anybody that's watching this to pause the video and take a few moments and write down your beliefs inside of each of the categories that Sean just went through, right? So what is it that you believe about time and success? And what is it that you believe about visibility and success, about money and success, about responsibility and success, so that you can go through the remainder of this video with those like specifics in focus.
Yeah, it's a really great idea. So to give you a prompt, if this helps, you can start journal writing or just speak it out with your coach, or however you're going to express it. But when I succeed, that means, or success equals, inside of all those lenses, and do it unfiltered. We're wanting to identify what's real. So don't play the, I know money will help me achieve world peace. Like, so what? That's not real to you right now. What's real to you is you don't like your uncle who has a lot of money. That's what's real. It doesn't matter what you think could be real or what you're supposed to say or what you're not supposed to say. We have to identify what our actual associations are, and then we can shift them. But you'll never shift them by pretending they don't exist. So this is an exercise of honest, transparent acknowledgement, not playing what we wished were true or what we think could be true, right? So yeah, I think that's a really good idea to pause the video and share with us. Type it in the comments. That's another thing that is really helpful when you not just identify, but express what you just recognize. So if you just recognize that you actually do have a fear of having too much money and what that looks like inside your family, or what that looks like in maybe changing you, then expressing that and saying it out loud, or in this case, typing it, is really important. So before we get to the solutions for each one of these values conflicts, one of the things that, again, is like mind-blowing, but also simplifying at the same time for a lot of people, is to recognize, why do we actually even want to succeed? I mean, it might make it like, it's so elementary that a lot of us don't check in. Why do I want to succeed? Or why do people in general want to succeed? What is it that we're actually desiring? And most people, I think, don't know that. They just know they want to succeed, but they don't really truly know what they want that success to produce in terms of experience. And part of that is just the human journey, right? We'll never know until we get into motion and go through all the phases of our life, et cetera. But I think it's really important to understand that a lot of us don't have clarity on what we want the outcome of success to be, or what we want the experience of success to be, either as a byproduct of that or contributing to that. I think most people don't actually want to succeed. I think what most humans want is to not fail. And that's different. It's actually wildly different. Because what we're trying to experience in our desire to avoid failure is different than what we're trying to experience in our desire to succeed. And if our desire is to avoid failure, then we actually are not intending on, and we're not committed to the experience of success, because what we're really committed to is avoiding the experience of failure. And those are not the same. It's like in sports, if you play to not lose, you can tie and you achieved your goal. You didn't lose, but you'll never win. And if you do win, it's just a not loss. And that's different. So many of us are not actually experiencing wins in our lives. We're experiencing not losses. And the human experience of a not loss is different than the human experience of a win. There's substance in the experience of a win. There's no substance in the experience of a not loss. There's just avoidance of the fear. But if you make a phone call, or if you get on stage, or you do whatever action you're trying to do to not lose, and you produce not loss, that actually hasn't changed your fear of losing, because the next time you take another action, the fear of losing is still there again. So we can go on our, like we can take 100 actions and not lose 100 times and never experience win. Never experience the feeling of winning. We just experience the avoidance of losing. So if we now understand that the true root desire for so many of us is simply to avoid the experience of failing, because that means the identity of failure. This is where it gets.
We don't get deep on our channel.
This is where it gets massively clear, like shockingly simple.
All right.
And terrifying at the same time. So if that's true, which I believe it is, then most of us are doing everything we're doing in life to try to avoid feeling like we are a failure. As a noun, as an identity, we as a person equal failure, loser, not good enough, unworthy, unlovable, all of those associations that we have to being a person who is a failure is what we're trying to avoid. And we've been taught, we've been programmed either explicitly or implicitly that if you fail, you are a failure. That's why we're trying to avoid failure. But we actually haven't been taught, I guess on some level we are taught this, that if we succeed, we are a success. That's not actually how we hold on to it. We hold on to it. If we succeed, we're not a failure.
Right.
that's why this chasing of success is actually a hollow chase. Because the achievement of success for most of us is not giving us the substantive, rich experience of success. It's just a avoidance of failure until the next time. And that's the cycle that most of us are on. And that's why success is so hollow for a lot of people. Because a lot of people succeed, but still don't experience the feeling of success, don't experience the feeling of being a success. And that's why we see this all the time, where people have all the money in the world. They have all the houses and the cars and the boats and the planes and the helicopters and the money and all the things they want, but they're not happy. They're not fulfilled. And a lot of times that adds more confusion, because if success is the answer to what it is that I'm trying to stop feeling, and I achieve success, but it hasn't made me stop feeling those things, well, then now what do I do? And it leads to a lot of people feeling hopeless. So this is why, for a lot of people, success is hollow. It's because we haven't identified actually what we want to experience inside of the success. We're just chasing the perpetual pursuit of not failing. And really the perpetual pursuit of hoping that we're not a failure. If any of this is landing for you, hopefully it's clarifying why you do certain things or don't do certain things, and what the intention in your actions actually are and what they don't have the capacity to do. So if we're on a quest to not fail, we can actually never achieve the experience of success. We can only achieve the experience of not failing. Now, this goes back to what Michelle brought up earlier. If my journey is a perpetual desire to not fail, then one of the ways I can not fail is make sure I don't try. And one of the ways I can convince myself to not try is to create this thing called perfectionism, or this thing called procrastination, or this thing called time management problems, or this thing called fear of failure, or this thing called fear of rejection. So if the mind can manufacture this fear, which ultimately operates as a resistance to taking action, which could produce the feeling of being a failure, then the procrastination and the perfectionism and the fear of failure and the fear of rejection and all of those sabotaging mechanisms are actually solutions to the problem. So hopefully that all is full circle now, and you fully understand how this is operating inside of our brains. Because if we don't understand how it's actually operating inside of our brains, then we're never going to be able to untie the knots, meaning our quest to not fail and our quest to not lose and our quest to not be embarrassed. Like, that's really so much of the human journey is a journey of the knots. It's like, that's our goal. I want to not lose, rather than I want to really fully experience success. So the solutions are fix the conflict. Essentially, that's the solution.
Yeah.
If the fear will produce a loss of time, then you've got to convince yourself that you can succeed without sacrificing the time. So that could be creating boundaries. That could be being really rigid with the time that you have for your family, for your hobbies, for your rest, for your relaxation, for reading, for whatever it is that you want to do. You've got to convince yourself that you can succeed without sacrificing the time for the other things that are important to you. And for a lot of us, those things are more important than the experience of success. And that's why it becomes a sabotage. That's why it becomes a fear of success. And it operates. The other reason, the other thing that makes fear of success so challenging is that if we understand how it operates, according to all the things we've been talking about so far, it actually makes sense, meaning like we feel justified in our sabotage. So I can go around going, you know what? I'm not successful because I want to spend a lot of time with my family.
Yep.
And then it's like, dang, that sounds like you're a really good person. I know I'm a great person.
Right.
We get to pop our great person collar.
Yeah. Not a failure.
Yeah, not a failure. And there's a reason why. If I didn't have this great person reason, then, you know, I could succeed. So the reasoning itself is very convincing.
Absolutely. It also turns into resentment if we're not careful. So it's something that we want to be really, really conscious of. Because then all of these things that are really, really important to us, all of these people, all of these relationships, these hobbies, this self, right, care, like yourself actually becomes a thing or a person or like a situation that's actually standing in the way of your successful. And that I would be successful if I didn't have these people I want to spend time with turns into, well, I would be successful if I didn't have these people.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And that's happened many times in my life where I recognized that I was holding on to this exact same thing, and specifically my family, as the burdens to my success. And it's just awful to recognize that level of resentment, to your point. And when we get to this place where we're really in this values conflict, we resent both things. You know, our value for spending time with family resents the success, and the success resents the family. And so now you've got double resentment going both ways. And that's one of the reasons why so many people feel like they're stuck. It's like damned if I do, damned if I don't kind of thing. You know, if I succeed, I lose here. And if I don't succeed, I lose there. So now it's just pick a loss, right? And which feeds into everything that we've been talking about. So we do have a video where we broke down boundaries. We'll put a card to watch that video if you want to dive deeper into setting boundaries and identifying boundaries, and then staying rigid with those boundaries. So the good news around the time conflict is you can convince yourself that success is possible with boundaries, with some discipline, with some support, that it is possible to succeed without the sacrifice of time. Now, you might have to negotiate a little bit. You might not be able to do all the things that you could do if you had no responsibilities in your life and no other relationships that you wanted to be a part of and no other things that you wanted to do, and just spend 24 hours a day towards success. Yeah, that level is probably not going to be available. But how can you still create a level of success by doing things more efficiently? Maybe if you're in business, doing things that can scale beyond you so that it's not just about you trading in your time. Can you increase your impact and still maintain your time boundaries? So when you understand what the conflict actually is, it can cause your brain to ask better questions. Right. That will then give you better answers that you would have never gotten before, because you weren't asking the better questions, because you were just stuck in the damned if I do, damned if I don't time value conflict.
Absolutely. You're taking responsibility, right? And the damned if I do, damned if I don't, we're blaming, right? It's their fault or it's their fault. But inside of what you just shared, the making the room in the calendar, setting the healthy boundaries, honoring those boundaries that you set, that's me taking personal responsibility. And in that, we are open to and have access to solutions because, like you said, we're asking those better questions.
Yeah, I think that's a really, hopefully, powerful realization for some of you, that exploring some of these conflicts actually can lead to expansion that you weren't asking the right questions to lead to before, right? Absolutely. So the second thing we talked about is visibility. And I believe that most people's fear of networking and fear of speaking and fear of leadership and fear of a lot of the things, especially in the personal development industry, is a fear of visibility. Because I think all of us were taught at some point in time in our lives, being visible is being vulnerable. I believe all of us have been punished for being visible. And not only punished for being visible, but punished for being authentically visible. We were punished for singing. We were punished for dancing. We were punished for grabbing for the cookies on aisle 3 of the supermarket. Like, we were punished for something that we wanted to do. And that desire was punished. And so the brain associates punishment to the authentic desire or the authentic expression. You know, how many of us were taught that we can't color or we can't sing? Yeah. You know, my wife shares a story of, I think it was in kindergarten, she drew, or like she colored an apple or something like that. And later on, somebody said, "Oh, you can't draw." And it was like such, because she went outside the lines, and it was such a painful association to this little 6-year-old mind. It was like, oh, well, the easiest way to never feel that again is don't ever color, because I can't suck at coloring if I don't color.
Right.
And to the juvenile mind, that makes a lot of sense. It actually makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
And it solves the problem.
Right.
So if somebody's ever been told they suck at singing, the best way to make sure that never happens again is don't ever sing.
Really, problem solved.
Problem solved. Mm-hmm. Again, that's how the fear of speaking or the fear of singing isn't actually, it's a solution. It's a solution to the problem. So the fear of visibility and the fear of being vulnerable and the fear of being attacked while vulnerable, I would say this is probably the biggest one from like an emotional standpoint, because this is such a deep primal fear. Maybe not the biggest one. Biggest is probably not the best word to use. It's the deepest one because it's embodied and it's unconscious for most of us. So it's rooted so deep that success equals spotlight equals visibility equals, oh shit, I might be hurt again. Hurt again, not heard again. I might be hurt again. And for some of us, that was actually physical punishment. So if we were physically punished because of visibility, now the embodied fear is a primal trauma, because our bodies will always do everything it can to keep us out of physical danger. So for some people, the fear of speaking isn't the fear of speaking. It's the fear of visibility. It's not the fear of visibility. It's the fear of vulnerability. It's not the fear of vulnerability. It's the fear of being punished. And it's not the fear of being punished. It's the fear of being beaten. And it's not the fear of being beaten. It's the fear of dying. Like that's how deep some of this stuff goes for a lot of us. So if we have an association between visibility and physical punishment, game over, unless you address the fear of the physical punishment. If we have an association between visibility and being laughed at, game over. It doesn't matter what affirmations you use. It doesn't matter what physical triggers and anchors you have. Game over unless you address the fear of being laughed at. Right. So like a lot of people are trying to become better speakers by avoiding all of their mistakes. The reason they're trying to avoid all of their mistakes is because they don't want to get laughed at.
Yeah.
So the attempt at succeeding in speaking is really just the attempt at avoiding failure, at avoiding being laughed at. That's the actual thing. So visibility is such a deeply seated fear for most of us. And I really believe that all of us have been punished to some degree for our authentic visibility.
Yeah.
And then the human brain is brilliant. It's like, that ain't going to happen again.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And then to your point earlier, just to, again, like bring this full circle, then the brain manufactures a solution.
Absolutely. Imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were you about to say?
This is where you mentioned earlier, like the importance of recognizing your individual details, right? Because if I got physically abused and you got laughed at or love withheld or shamed, or somebody else had another like traumatizing experience, maybe they were abandoned by friends or by a parent or caretaker, all of these, like the real solutions, right, to what's actually happening are going to be unique. And that's why it's so important to gift yourself the personalized attention, because this is not something that you're going to be able to intellectualize your way out of. This is an embodied, like, survival. You said death earlier. So this is embodied survival, and the human brain's job is to keep this thing alive. So if it believes in to any degree that that's at risk, what you said, game over.
Game over.
And it's not going to help you overcome that, because it believes that it is helping you based on how it's following right now. So if you resonate with any of this and you recognize, like, oh snap, that's me, like I can see myself inside of this, then get support. We're a coaching company and we offer complimentary coaching consultations with one of our certified coaches. So, click the link in the description, book a call, gift yourself that individualized support to unhook yourself from your specific and unique details. It's so important. Even if you don't succeed, just to be able to be like succeed, right? Like, and I'm using air quotes, right? Even if you don't achieve your big, huge dreams and goals, but to have a better experience of life than just moving along, operating and this was me for years, in fear of being punished, doing everything I was doing to avoid getting punished. That's not a way to live. There's so much more life and freedom out there. And if you don't resonate with any of this, but you're a coach, then this is, your clients are dealing with this. And it is so important for us to really be able to understand how this works and what it actually takes. There's no button to push that can just, boop, make that go away, because we're talking about your body's primal desire for survival. And I don't say that to be dramatic, because I'm not trying to hype it up, right? For drama reasons, right? Get better ratings. But it really is to the body. It really truly is life or death. And when you understand that, then you can treat it with the importance that it is worthy of, that you are worthy of, so that you can feel good and feel safe to be able to go after whatever it is that you want to do and reach for the cookies in the aisle, or share your story or your message and put yourself out there. And I know that this is important. I know this is important to you as coaches, because there are people who need you, right? There are people who need your experiences of life. They need the lessons that you have. And if we don't do this work, they don't get those, and that sucks.
Yeah, it was such an important piece that you brought up about what this fear of visibility prevents us from doing. So it's not about whether you succeed or not. Like, let's take singing as an example. You might not become a Grammy award-winning artist, So you might not become that standard of success, and your album might not sell 1 million copies and all those things. But what if you hear your own voice? What if you sing the song that needs to come out of your body? What we're saying is that by itself is the win. And the success on top of that can happen. It might not, we don't know, but that's actually not where the rich experience is. The rich experience is when you stop suppressing the things that you're suppressing and you start doing the things that you're afraid of. That's the win. How other people relate to it or how other people respond to it or whether they buy it or not, that's actually not the win. The win is getting over the personal suppression. Because if you're afraid of being laughed at because somebody told you couldn't sing one time, that suppression of your voice, you're doing that. Other people can't laugh at you because you're pre-laughing at you. And you're using the fear of being laughed at as the reason to not speak, or as the reason to not sing, or as the reason to not do the videos, or as the reason to not write the book, or as the reason to not be visible in some way, shape, or form. It's that personal suppression of your voice, of your message, of your validity. That's the problem. So if we could just get you over that, and the message comes out of your voice in whatever way it comes out, that's the win. And the only way to succeed on top of that is to get that out first anyway. So if we're ever going to get there to meaningful success, we got to get to meaningful. And then we can build success on top of that. So if this is landing for you, I want you to think about how you hold yourself back and where and what you're holding yourself back from doing, and make that your target. That you will stop rejecting yourself. So that's why this is the deepest one, because it's rooted in so much of our past individual history and then covered up by a lot of justifications and a lot of beliefs and a lot of fears and manufactured stuff. And the real thing is this human's probably afraid of being seen or heard because of what that could lead to.
Absolutely.
The third one that we mentioned is money. And we're not going to dive into this one. We'll put a card or a link in the description. We actually just got done producing a mini money course, and it's like 90 minutes or so, or maybe a little bit longer than that. So it's a deep dive because it's a big conversation. There are a lot of different angles to it. There are a lot of different depths to it. So I'm going to save the deep conversation for, I'm just going to refer you to that for the deep conversation. But the simple solution is you have to heal whatever your relationship with money requires. If your relationship with money requires you detaching your self-esteem from your bank account, which is mine, that's my deepest, most unhealthy relationship with money, that when I have a lot of money, that I'm valuable as a person, and when I don't, that I'm not. So now money means too much. I put too much pressure on making money, and I put too much emphasis on what it means about me as a human when I don't have this abundance of money. For some of you, it might be embracing how much money you do have. It might be identifying how little money actually means in what you want to do on the planet or how you want to experience life. Again, it's all individual, but whatever your relationship to money is, we need to make sure it's clean and clear and empowering. Because if more success equals more money, and money has a negative association to it now, then more money is actually the wrong thing to get. I really want you to understand that. if right now you have any negative association to money, then your unconscious brain thinks that it's doing you a favor by making sure you don't get more of the thing that has a negative association to it. So it has to be clean. It has to be clear. And then we can elevate. But until that's cleaned up, you're not going to want to make more money. So if success leads to that, then your unconscious mind thinks we're being a good person by not having any more of this bad money, or we're protecting ourselves by not increasing the pain that's associated to money. We're just good where we are right here. And the final one that we mentioned is responsibility. This is probably the most intellectual one, I would say, that we say, because responsibility itself is intellectual in nature. And we think if we have more success, then that leads to more responsibility. But we have to be holding on to responsibility as a bad thing for this to be a values conflict, which I think most of us do. Most of us don't like the idea of responsibility. It's an intellectual construct. It feels like a burden. It feels like it's heavy. You know, more responsibility means I got to do more things that I don't want to do.
Right. Absolutely.
So as long as more responsibility is anything negative, similar to what I just said about money, then you're not going to want to increase the thing that's bad.
No.
So you either need to change the way you see responsibility and recognize that more responsibility gives you the ability to respond to the circumstances in your life, or the ability to increase your impact maybe, or the ability to do a lot more things. So you can change the association to responsibility to where it's positive, or detach the connection between success and responsibility. Like some of the things that you're telling yourself you're going to be responsible for when you become more successful are not true. You're just using them to scare yourself as a justified reason to not be successful. So a lot of the things that we use to scare ourselves, if we shine a light on it and challenge it, they're actually not truthful. We've just never challenged it before. So overall, once you identify what your conflict is that's in the way of success for you, you got to heal what that conflict is. So before we get to this final piece of the conversation about re-succeeding, now that we understand all this association business with success and what it means to each one of us individually, before we get into that, is there anything you want to say to wrap up that conversation of the values, conflicts, and solutions?
Just do this work. It's worth it. I mean, it really is. Like, do this work. Whatever that means for you, whatever this work is, with the money, with the responsibility, with the visibility, with the time, do the work, because you are worth it. And the people that are waiting for you are worth it.
Yeah. And the experience itself, there's a richness to the experience itself.
You don't even know. And yeah, sorry, your brain's just going to tell you that's not true. And I get that, but it's yes. Yes, yes, yes. Hear that little story, and you got to collect evidence. Sean, you said that earlier, right? That we have to prove it, right? Almost to ourselves. So we have to, I started to create like a physical list of like, hey, here's the evidence. I did this thing. I created these boundaries, and look, I was actually more productive. I took this time, and look, I'm actually more successful. I'm getting more stuff done. We have to create the evidence, because our beliefs just have a lot of evidence for the old story. So we have to be diligent about that, about collecting that evidence, that new evidence for these new stories.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, because that's the way the brain works. We have a fear that says, if we do this thing, bad stuff will happen. So we need to start collecting, when we do this thing, good stuff happens, as a way to counter the fear train of thought. So I don't know when it was that I recognized this. I don't remember in this moment, whether it was with myself or with a client or what have you, but I remember the feeling of like just having my breath taken away when I recognized that there's the fear of success, but then there's the fear of re-succeeding. So this applies to people that have already succeeded at something, but for whatever reason didn't retain the success. So maybe they got a bunch of money, but then lost it, or created a lot of success and visibility and all the things we've been talking about, and then it created some of the fallout. And now we're trying to remotivate ourselves to succeed the way we did before. But what we have to understand, goes back to this evidence piece, is that the brain has real evidence that success is bad, because it either led to something bad or we weren't able to sustain it. So if you think about this hill analogy that we've been using, if you climb a hill and then fall down from that hill, the brain associates the pain of the fall to the hill. So then the brain goes, well, I didn't like falling down from that hill. Oh, I know how we can make sure we never fall down from that hill again. Don't climb it. So now the fear of the fall becomes the fear of the climb. Hopefully that is as clear coming out as it is in my head. I really want you to get this. The brain is afraid of the pain of the fall, and it knows that it could only have fallen from a place that it's already climbed. So then the brain goes, in order to not fall from that high place, let's not ever go there again. I mean, it's the fear of heights, right? People aren't actually afraid of heights. They're afraid of falling from high places. So the way you make sure you don't fall from somewhere high is don't ever get somewhere high. And if you stay on the ground, you can't fall from somewhere high. So that's essentially what the brain is doing when it reassociates, or when it associates old success and pain, and then creates the fear of re-succeeding again. And we see this a lot when clients have created something, and this happened to me too, right? I had this massive first year success, or first year and a half success in coaching. And then year two, I filed bankruptcy. So the brain's like, well, we're not going to do that again.
That was
and
awful.
I unplugged from all the things that created my success, because my brain didn't want all of those things to create such a dramatic emotional, financial, and business fail again. So it's like, all right, we'll just stay here and not do all those things that got us to those high places that we then fell from. So when the brain has associated pain to success, but it's based on real evidence, now we have a different game. Most of the things we've been talking about so far for most people is theoretical in nature. The brain has decided, if we succeed, this will happen. But in this conversation, the brain is saying, when we succeeded, this did happen.
Right.
I just felt my goosebumps pop up on that one, because now the brain is going, no, we're not talking theory here. You're trying to out theorize my embodied knowledge. And that's where a lot of our motivation literally has zero chance to overcome the rooted and real association to the catastrophe that happened when we succeeded before. So the solution to this one, again, it's so individual in nature, but the high level solution to this one is we have to break that association. Sometimes we can break that association by recognizing that we actually didn't fall down from that hill. Or maybe we fell on the other side of the hill, setting us up to go up the next hill that's waiting for us. And that's all a part of our journey of progress.
Right.
Sometimes we need to recognize what felt like a fall wasn't actually a fall at all. it was just a reorganizing, or we're better because of that, or we had to fall because we needed to learn the lesson. So for me, I recognize looking back, I had to get the rug pulled out from under me because my association of self-esteem and money needed to be checked. I needed to confront it. And as long as there's a ton of money coming in, I don't have to confront it.
Right. That makes sense.
And so in the grand scheme of things, if I look down at my journey, I recognize, I had to confront it. So now I recognize that the bankruptcy and all the things that I had to do to reorganize my business and take a look at what I want to do with my life, all of those things at a high level were and are extremely valuable elements in my progress as a human, as a business owner, as a husband, as a father, as all the things that are important to me. So sometimes we can reassociate to the experience of the fall. Other times we can recognize that what caused us to fall is no longer relevant. This happens in relationships all the time. You know, we do some internal work around self-love or something, and people go, yeah, but I'm afraid of relationships. And I'll say, I'm sure you've done this too with a lot of your clients. I'll say, okay, what is it that you're afraid of? Like, what if I get into a relationship again and they cheat on me? Okay, tell me about the experience last time when they cheated on you. And then if you were to see those signs again, what would happen this time? And without fail, every single person I've gone down this road with says, oh, if I saw that sign again this time, I either wouldn't let it happen or I wouldn't let it affect me. Or what a lot of them say is, I'm not even attracted to the kind of person anymore that would do that. So right. I am totally different. And then at some point in time, I'll say some version of, so what's the problem? And they go, yeah, nothing. But they still have a fear associated to relationships. They just haven't realized that what caused the problems has now been shifted. Right. And so the thing that made them susceptible to falling isn't there anymore. So they won't fall. Sometimes that's the biggest lesson that can break the attachment. Right. Between
like this person has never taken that journey.
Exactly.
Like this person I am right now has never climbed
this person that I am right now. Right. Like this version of you has never fallen down the mountain because the one that climbed wasn't the current version of you.
Correct.
It was an earlier
that was
version.
Really empowering for me and I have a particular client that I remember having this conversation with, and that was huge for her to recognize, like, oh, I'm brand new in my business. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's huge. And that gives the feeling of hope, like there's something new.
Right.
And then the third thing I would say that is a potential solution for people is to set a different goal. Like, don't force yourself up the same mountain that you have fear and pain and embarrassment associated to. Just choose a different mountain. And it doesn't mean you change careers or anything like that. It could just be literally just a tiny shift of, taking a dollar goal and changing the dollar amount. Or if you have this dollar goal, change the dollar goal to the impact goal. Like how many people do you want to impact versus how much money do you want to extract? And those could lead to the exact same game plan, but focusing on this, because it means you haven't fallen from that hill. You've only fallen from the other hill. So just shifting the focus can break the attachment because there isn't association to a new target. There's only an association to the old target or the old hill. So is there anything you want to add to those solutions before we wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, it's wild to me how I almost started laughing, how simple it is, right? Like just shoot for another goal, right? Like, oh, you fell off that hill? Okay, well then just climb that one. Have another one. And I get it. Like if anybody's watching this and okay, sure. I get that because I felt that way. And it's easy for me to even still think that when I'm listening to you, but it actually the way our brain works is actually very simple. Our problems are super complicated, so we do think that the solutions need to be super complicated as well, right? Because then if we figure it out, then we're really smart and we feel like we achieved this big thing. But the reality is that it's actually very simple. Just like the solution of, oh, you fell down, don't climb back up again. That's simple. Right? That's simple how the brain works, problem, solution. And so it really, like the simplicity is, it works. Like it's almost, there's a playful sort of lightness to it. And I just want you to know, if you're listening to this and doubting any of it, I promise you the idea of just shooting for another goal or unattaching your pain from that particular target can have massive, massive impact on your ability to be able to get up and climb without the resistance.
Yeah, I'm really glad you pointed to that, because a lot of this stuff seems like it's too simple to work.
Yeah,
like, there's no way. There's no way. But I want you to understand that if I would have done this video 15 years ago, I would have said none of this stuff. This is not theoretical, you guys. I didn't learn any of this in any kind of goal setting book or seminar, any of this. This is all based on what has worked. This is not a philosophical presentation. Like, in order to get rid of the fear of success, which I didn't even know existed 15, 16 years ago, in order to get rid of this fear of success, I think this will work, or I think this will work. No. This is like coming to you, both of us, after years and years and years of in the work ourselves and so many other people going, okay, these are the 4 things that have shown up. Not these are the 4 philosophical, theoretical reasons. These are the 4 buckets. And it's so clear. Like, these are the 4 buckets, because this is what we see all the time, over and over and over again. And what do we do? What have we done that has worked with people that have this association to re-succeeding? Oh, we help them detach from that, or we help them realize this, or we help them do that. Like, this is all based on looking back wisdom of what has worked, not philosophy. And that's one of the reasons why it might not make sense if you're on the front side of your journey and you haven't fallen down, or some of these experiences just don't relate to you yet because you're just not in your journey as much, or you haven't been doing it, as long. Hopefully this wisdom can help you avoid some of the things that knock a lot of people out, like literally knock them out. They don't recover. They can't recover financially. They can't recover emotionally from a lot of these problems. So I hope the wisdom lands for you. And if some of it doesn't make sense, it causes you to have a reaction that Michelle just spoke to, like, there's no way that can't be that simple. What I've been working on is this for 7 years. Right. Exactly. What we would say is, yes, that's what's been getting worked on for 7 years. And if it hasn't gotten you over the hump, well, then we probably need to work on something different, because that thing is not actually producing the results. So hopefully this has landed. We've said it multiple times. Get yourself some personalized attention, book a call. It's a free call, no obligation, so that we can help you identify. We can ask you questions that you won't ask yourself, or you'll answer in ways that you wouldn't answer if you asked yourself the questions, and help you identify what are the actual knots that are getting in your way. What are the sabotaging patterns? What are the actual causes of the problem, not the solutions disguised as the problem? And we can support you. And Michelle said something that was really important earlier. This is not just for you, but this is for your clients. If you're not experiencing any of the stuff that we've been talking about, all of your clients are something that we've talked about. So this wisdom can support you in being a better coach if you want to be a coach, as well as obviously your own personalized journey. Now, if you like this video, take a look at that video right there. We're going to break down 6 powerful coaching questions you can use to help anybody change a belief. And because people want it to be true, meaning I want to be able to change my patterns without changing the ingredients that created the patterns, I don't want to have to deal with that stuff. I don't want to have to
Yeah.
confront anything and heal any, griefs or wounds or